As most of us know by now, Chris Paul was traded from the Washington Wizards to the Golden State Warriors for Patrick Baldwin Jr., Jordan Poole, Ryan Rollins, the 2027 second round pick, 2030 first round pick, top 20 protected, and some cash considerations. And while the first reaction was, what the heck is this? What is going on? It kind of then shifted to, well, I guess we understand it. Jordan Poole and Draymond, there was no way they were going to be able to remain on the same team together, so they had to move one of them. They decided to move Poole, which I think is the right decision. And now the conversation has shifted to, well, what does this look like with adding Chris Paul to the Golden State Warriors? Does he come off the bench? Can he play with them? Is he even going to be healthy come playoffs? Because we know he has struggled with injury. And I'm here to tell you today, I think it was a really good trade, and I'm really looking forward to see what a backcourt of Steph Curry and Chris Paul can look like together. I think the initial thought amongst most NBA fans is that Chris Paul is going to fill Jordan Poole's role. He's going to come off the bench. He's going to be the sixth man. He's going to run the second unit. We know he's an amazing playmaker, even in his old age. He led the league in assists about 2 seasons ago. And last year he was at 8-9 assists a game. So he's still an elite playmaker. In one of Chris Paul's first press conferences with Golden State media, he had this to say about the idea of him coming off the bench.
Presumably you'd be coming off the bench playing with the second unit that's a lot younger than the Warriors of the past have been with JK and Moses. Just what do you think of their depth, their bench players that you might be playing alongside?
You coaching? Oh, okay. Well, I don't know what the situation is going to be yet. You know what I mean? So I think that'll be for us to figure out once we get going.
You've never come off the bench in your entire career. Is that something that you'd be willing to do?
Like I said, it'll be a conversation for us when camp starts or whatnot. But me and Steve have talked or whatnot. But that ain't something that you be like, "What up, man? Where you starting? You coming off the?" You know what I mean? So I think we'll figure all that stuff out in camp.
So obviously this clip goes viral. It's giving, to be honest with you, big Carmelo Anthony vibes from when he joined OKC, when the reporters asked Carmelo, "Oh, are you coming off the bench playing with Paul George and playing with Russ?" And Melo yells to the back, "AOPG, they saying I got to come off the bench." That situation didn't necessarily go that amazing for Carmelo, and people are wondering if this is going to be a repeat of that situation. Chris Paul has never come off the bench in his career. He's played in and started for all 1,214 games of his career. Like I said earlier, he led the league in assists in the 2021-22 season. So in his mind, he's still, likely in his mind, I'll say, he's still an elite point guard. So now we have that soundbite from a couple of weeks ago from Chris Paul in mind. That came out 3 weeks ago. Recently, Steph Curry was interviewed by The Athletic covering his new documentary he has coming out, Underrated, Apple TV+. I haven't seen it yet. I plan on watching it. But there was a part of this interview that was really interesting to me because he talked about roles that players have to play on championship teams. The biggest thing is, Curry said, look at teams that have won. You realize that there's a certain way about how you show up on a nightly basis. Everybody's important. Everybody is valuable. It's not going to look pretty for the majority of the year for some guys. Some are going to be in and out of the rotation. Guys are going to be asked to do things that may not all the way vibe with how they see themselves. You've got your core that's got to figure out how to stay at a certain level. All those things are about winning. We have had a lot of narratives around the team that have been a bit distracting to that, but that's all it is. It's not about anything other than winning. On the surface level, I think it'd be easy to say that Curry might be directly talking about Chris Paul's situation. Chris Paul's role might not vibe with how he sees himself and how he sees his skill set. I don't know if Chris Paul sees himself as a six-man role. I know a lot of people are saying that's the role that he's likely going to be stepping into. And while, yes, I think that is a good role, I think Chris Paul can immediately step in and take over that six-man Jordan Poole role. Don't get me wrong here. We all know he's an amazing playmaker. One of the things that the Warriors struggled with last year was when Steph Curry was off the court, their offense struggled a lot. Jordan Poole wasn't necessarily the facilitator that they wanted him to be, or at least last year he hadn't proved to be that yet. He might develop that in the future. I wish him all the best of luck when the Washington Wizards, and likely we'll probably talk about that team later because I'm really excited to see what happens there. But truthfully, the thing that I'm most excited about when it comes to this new look Warriors with the addition of Chris Paul is what a backcourt of Chris Paul and Steph Curry could possibly be. Now, before you go crazy and say that backcourt is way too small, defensive liability and all this, that, and the third, just hear me out. Since the beginning of the 2017 season, we've seen Chris Paul thrive with really dynamic, ball-dominant guards, and we've seen him have success with it. 2 seasons in Houston playing alongside James Harden. One of those seasons they had the #1 record in the Western Conference, and they took the Golden State Warriors to 7 games in the Western Conference Finals. They just happened to go 7 for 44 in that game 7 from three-point land, and they missed 27 three-pointers in a row, which at the time I believe was the NBA record for how many threes missed in a row in a game. In that 2019 playoffs that Chris Paul, James Harden Rockets face Kevin Durant and Steph Curry again, they lose in 6 games, but all 6 of those games were within 6 points. That Rockets team was successful in the regular season, I'll say. They didn't get their ultimate goal that they wanted, but that was a really, really good team. After that, he goes and plays with a young SGA to a young OKC team that no one expected to even make the playoffs. They end up making the playoffs and surprise everybody. And now, the last 3 seasons, he's played alongside Devin Booker, another dynamic, ball-dominant guard. First year there, they go to the NBA Finals. The last 2 seasons have been iffy, but I'm not putting all of that solely on Chris Paul. My point here is we've seen him play with ball-dominant, dynamic guards and have some success playing alongside of them. And in most of those cases, maybe outside of the OKC one, you can even make the argument, solidified honestly argument, that all of the guards he played with were better than him, and he still found a way to play alongside of them. So here's what I'm excited to see potentially for this upcoming Warriors season. Steve Kerr's not necessarily been one to drastically change up lineups on a game-to-game basis, and unless when he starts to get into the playoffs he can make some adjustments, but during the regular season the lineup's usually the lineup for the Warriors. However, I wouldn't be surprised if he at least tries to see what a starting backcourt of Chris Paul, Steph Curry look like. And before everyone says, well, Klay Thompson's too small to run small forward, I don't think that's going to work defensively, all that jazz. We'll address that in a second, but the lineup I'm excited to see the most is a Chris Paul, Steph Curry backcourt, and not with Klay Thompson running the 3, but leaving Wiggins out there and bringing Klay Thompson as a spark off the bench. Now, it's very similar to Chris Paul. Klay Thompson's basically been a starter his whole career. It would be an adjustment for him as well. But like Curry said, guys are going to be asked to do things that may not vibe with how they see themselves. I would love to see stretches of games where Chris Paul is the primary ball handler, and just like Steph Curry already does, running off of screens, and Draymond has the ball. But now instead of Draymond making that pass, it's Chris Paul maybe even trying to attack the rim and set something up for himself to draw some defense. And now you have Steph running around, and Chris Paul, we still know he's one of the best passers in the league, finding Steph off of open cuts, backdoor screens, pin downs. That to me sounds like beautiful basketball to watch. Now you say, Hawk, there's no way Klay Thompson's coming off the bench. I'm talking crazy. There's no way they drastically change the Splash Brothers lineup that's been so successful for them all these years just because Chris Paul's here. Sure, maybe he does still come off that 6-man role. To be honest with you, I think that's likely, the most likely what we'll see happen. But in the back of my mind, I really would like to see Steve Kerr at least try a couple of games of starting Chris Paul and Steph Curry next to each other just to see what it looks like, especially at least in the preseason. Give it a chance, see what it looks like. It can't hurt, right? The other piece of that, like we talked about earlier, is Klay Thompson at the 3. When down the stretch of games, I at least can guarantee you to close out a lot of games, you're going to see Steph, Chris, and Klay on the court at the same time. And you might wonder, well, what does that look like? I don't think that's going to work. Klay Thompson's too small to play the 3. Well, if we look at what they did last year, Klay Thompson ran a lot of 3 for the Golden State Warriors just last season, because there were a lot of lineups when Steph Curry, Jordan Poole, Klay Thompson on the court, or Steph Curry, Dante DiVincenzo, Klay Thompson on the court, or Dante, Jordan Poole, and Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson ran a lot of 3 this year. Now, did he still play his 2? Yeah, he did. But he ran a lot of 3 last season, and it was to varying degrees successful for them. They can run their small ball lineups that they love so much. Run Steph, run Chris, run Klay, then run Wiggins and run Draymond. Does it make them a smaller lineup? Yeah, it does. But the Warriors have been a smaller lineup this entire dynasty run that they've been on. They have had years when they've had big guys like Andrew Bogut, yes. But their immense success came from those death lineups when they were running small ball, letting Draymond run the 5 and getting up and down the floor. The Warriors now have a chance to run those very similar small ball death lineups that everyone loved, but now with one of the greatest playmakers that the game has ever seen in those lineups in Chris Paul. Is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not. Will there be some growing pains? Of course. But Chris Paul being added to this Warriors team has the opportunity to add a new wrinkle that I don't think they've ever had. And I'm really excited to see what that backcourt of Chris Paul and Steph Curry can do together. And all of this is on top of the base layer of, yes, him being that sixth man, him operating in a lot of pick and rolls when Steph isn't on the court, and making sure that offense still flows even when Steph's not on the court. It's definitely a high risk, high reward trade that they pulled off, but I'm really excited to see what happens this season with this team. Do you think a Steph Curry, Chris Paul backcourt can work? Do you think I'm crazy for saying Klay Thompson could be the new sixth man for this team? Let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, and I'll catch you in the next one. I'm out. Peace.